Hello and welcome to Conversations With, our monthly series of informal and enlightening conversations between the leading-edge teacher and author, Jim Self, and some of today's most progressive and connected teachers, channels, and authors. Now, here's our host, Jim Self.
Hi, Bruce. Thanks very much for being here. It's a real pleasure to have you in this conversation. There's many people that are followers of the work, the books that you've done, and all the great knowledge that you brought forth. And so it's a real pleasure to have you here. Thank you.
Jim, I certainly appreciate this. Thanks for the opportunity to spreading this information around the world and facilitating our evolution. I so appreciate that.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's my pleasure. What are those beliefs? You want to talk about those?
Well, let's see which ones, because some of them are profound, especially connected to your work. So let's list them. The first belief, that a misperception that we built the world around, which is wrong, is the belief in the concept of a Newtonian universe where matter is primary and fundamentally all there is, and energy is something that is secondary and doesn't really have a big impact on matter. That's a Newtonian world. And that is why we are so focused on materialism. In a Newtonian world, materialism is primary. So the more matter you have in our world, the more that belief in materialism says, oh, you're doing really good in the hierarchy. You got a lot of matter. So we seek matter, money, physical things like that. And it turns out that belief in materialism is completely flawed, because there's a larger encompassing science that encompasses or encloses Newtonian physics, but the larger science is called quantum physics. And what quantum physics basically says, your belief in materialism, well, that's totally incorrect, because nothing is made out of matter. Everything is made out of energy, which, of course, is like mind-boggling for people who are looking around at the physical world around them right now going, what do you mean? I see all this physical stuff here. And I go, well, the reason you see it is an illusion. That's photons of light bouncing off the surface of energy, and so you're seeing the reflection of light. You're not seeing the energy of those structures, because a simple point, Newtonian physics says the atoms are physical particles. Quantum physics, taking apart the atom, finding the subunits, which started out as electrons, protons, and neutrons, and then later became quarks and gluons, fermions, and all these other things, find out that the fundamental building blocks of an atom are not material at all. They're just energy vortices, like little miniature tornadoes. So it says an atom isn't physical. It's got a force field to it. A tornado, you can see a tornado because of all the dirt and dust in it. And I say, well, if you try to drive your car through a tornado, it wouldn't happen. You'd hit the tornado, it'd be like hitting a stone wall. And then I say, well, first of all that dirt and dust, that's not really part of the tornado. That got picked up in it. So if you get rid of all the dirt and dust, there's a tornado, but you can't see it. It's just there's force. How do you know it's there? When you hit it, you'll know it's there. Atoms are miniature tornadoes, the nano tornadoes. So they have the illusion of being physical, but they're actually energy vortices. And why is that relevant? Because it turns out that in the new physics, the word field, which emphasizes the collective nature of all the energy, if you define it, and you say, what is a field? And then physics would say, well, it's an invisible moving force that shapes the physical world. And then all of a sudden, wow, that's interesting. That's the same definition that spiritualists have used for the last few thousand years in describing spirit. And the answer is, yeah, field and spirit are both the recognition that invisible forces are shaping this world. We have left that image out of modern science and therefore have ignored the actual shaping features that shape the physical world, which is this invisible energy, which, as you well know, includes the invisible energy that comes from our own thoughts and our own consciousness. And the quantum physics is revealing, yes, your thoughts and consciousness are shaping the world in which you are living. So all of a sudden it says, wow, I was focusing on the genes and chemistry shaping the way I was living. It's like, no, it's your thoughts and your perceptions and your
emotions.
Yeah, and emotions, definitely.
Yep. So when you okay, that's the perfect one. That's the place where the scientists used to look out into the astronomers used to look out into the sky and say, well, you only see what's out there, and we've determined that what's out there is matter, and the other part that's not matter doesn't count. It doesn't matter. So
yes, it doesn't matter. And exactly. But then quantum physics, the new physics, says, no, wait, that belief was wrong. It's the invisible stuff that is more primary, and the material stuff is secondary. Einstein's simple quote was, the field, that's the invisible energy, the field is the sole governing agency of the particle. What he meant was the invisible energy field is the sole governing agency of matter. And since we had a great track record of totally ignoring the field, it's time to wake up and realize, oh, my God, we haven't paid any attention to that invisible stuff, and that's more important.
Yeah. So what creates the field? In a way, now in quantum physics, it's very clear that light is both a particle and a wavelength. And so
depending how you look at it.
Right, exactly.
And then that all of a sudden, then your consciousness made that decision. And then it turns out, we are creating that. I mean, to the extent, I really love it because Stephen Hawking wrote a paper not that long ago. I forgot who, Arthur, I can't remember the guy's last name. Stephen and Arthur wrote a paper about the fact that human consciousness is actually influencing the unfolding of the cosmos.
Yes.
It's like, wow, we take that in. It's kind of big, but it's totally true, and it really is important in regard to the unfolding of the cosmos that we call our planet Earth and the biosphere in which we live.
So how we think and how we hold emotions, thought being electrical, emotions being magnetic, begin to shape the electromagnetic field of consciousness shifting into a result.
Absolutely.
So, yes, right, which is the whole essence of where we work. So, but as you begin to play with this and you begin to get more quiet and more focused, that you have the capacity to be the creator rather than responding to the external reality, your ability to focus that thought and not engage with those emotions of the collective consciousness, and many of those emotions that have structured your gene structure in the first place, the mom saying, well, it's hereditary, you're going to have cancer because we've all had cancer. As you begin to not accept those thoughts and reshift the thoughts, changing the magnetics of the emotions, you begin to create a different reality for everybody.
Absolutely. Internally, you change the reality of your internal structure because those thoughts and those emotions are primary in selecting and modifying the genes that are in all of our cells. So all of a sudden it says, oh my goodness, by just changing the way I look at the world, I change my biology. And I go, absolutely.
Right, and when you change that vibrational frequency, I mean, we all know what depression feels like, and we all know what enthusiasm feels like. The atoms have a lot more room in enthusiasm than they do in that scrunched down depression. So as you change that thought and that emotion, you begin to raise the vibrational frequency. Isn't this kind of the same place where that adage in the Bible says, put your candle on the candlestick so all in the house can see? Aren't we all beginning to be, as we start to become more aligned with that natural 95% of us that came in perfect well-being, aren't we going to begin to start to influence that reality just by the presence of our thought and existence?
That's the only way we're going to influence the reality, in fact. And that's why it's so critical. It says the only way is we have created the current crises through the way we perceive and respond to life, and to change that around and recover the planet and bring it back to the garden, we are the ones that have to change the perceptions and attitudes that have created that. So it comes back to us as active participants in evolution, not passive individuals. And this evolution really requires that we as individuals have to do something versus, well, just sit in my easy chair and wait for that evolution to come. It's like, no, it's not going to happen that way.
Right. And so here we are. I mean, we're at that point where this spontaneous evolution is occurring all around us. You know, there is one component in this which I'm really curious about your thought, because I don't see anything in the book. in quick looking at that spontaneous evolution, is this aspect of time. Do you look at time as a consideration here? Because so many of us create our reality, we believe, because of the past and of the future. And there is no real past and future. You can't create a past, or you can't create a future in the future, or change the past in the past. But once you get into that present time moment and kind of work with the internal guidance system, your ability to recognize your past didn't happen that way virtually at all, and the ability to construct a different future only happens in that present moment of time. And so tell me about that from your point of view, because you talk about all these pieces very nicely.
Yeah, well, for me, what's really critical, as you just said, was the recognition is time is a manifestation that we create in our minds. And why that's important is you could, I say, okay, go back to this point where you were 5 years old, and then you close your eyes, and then you go back and you see yourself at 5 years old, and then I go, if you really get into it, are you back when you're 5 years old, or when you were 5 years old, were you really here looking back at 5 years old? And all of a sudden you start to realize what people have to own is, what's the difference between a dream and the reality? Which one's the dream? Which is the reality? I mean, that's what the Australian Aborigines have always tried to tell us, is that they call this the dream world, and they live in a different reality.
Yes, exactly. So this whole aspect of recognizing yourself and recognizing yourself in the present moment is the ability to begin to really alter the realities that you play in. And I think that's where I know all the people that I get to play with are becoming very, very conscious in that concept and owning it. And I'm watching what happens to their families and to the people around them. They begin to influence rather than react. And this is what
there's an interesting parallel here with the periodic table of elements. It's very interesting because it really implies something about the nature of relationships and community. And it goes like this, is that of 118 elements in the table, all but 6 of them form chemistry. But there are 6 elements in the table that don't form any chemistry at all, and they're called the noble gases. And why this is important is because it provides insight into the nature of the physical world in which we live, because that's a reflection of the chemistry. And it goes like this. All atoms in the periodic table are electrically neutral because they have an equal number of positive and negative electrons. The distribution of the electrons in the shells surrounding the nucleus is not equal. And as a result, this has caused an issue for especially 112 of the elements for this reason. Atoms spin like little nano tornadoes. And so imagine a washing machine, and I throw a blanket in, and it ends up in a lump on one side of the machine, and then I turn on the washing machine. And what happens is the out-of-balance washing machine starts to vibrate and bang and walk around, make all kinds of noise and everything. And you're looking for peace and quiet, so what do? You open up the lid of the washing machine. You redistribute the blanket so that it's evenly distributed all the way around the drum. And then when you turn on the washing machine, it spins in perfect harmony and peace and quiet. And I say, well, what's relevant? I go, 112 elements on the periodic table spin with a wobble because the electrons, which are like the blankets, are not evenly distributed. And as a result, atoms that are wobbling are looking for peace. So what do? Is that they find other atoms that are wobbling, and in that case, make chemistry with them to do what? Create perfect spin balance as a couple. So one out-of-balance atom will meet with another out-of-balance atom, and if they complement each other, they will join together, and 2 out-of-balance atoms then spin in perfect balance. Very interesting way. If I was to relate that relationship to people, I would say that most of us are out of balance because of the programming of the beliefs and the culture that we live in. So our beliefs are not in harmony with the world around us. And why the chemistry becomes important is that kind of chemistry is called codependency. 2 atoms come together because they're both wobbly, and yet they can find that if they bring their wobbles together, they can smooth out the ride. I mean, even to the extreme of sadomasochism, where a sadist who loves to inflict pain will complement and bind with a masochist who loves to receive pain, and then they spin in harmony, So basically it says our relationships are codependent based on our not being in balance. And I go, well, what's interesting is that the noble gases are the only elements in the periodic table whose electrons are in perfect balance. So when they spin, they spin in perfect balance, no wobble at all. And then you would say, oh, well, that's really nice, but they don't form relationships. And I go, well, here's the interesting thing, because it's going to, ultimately you'll see this, Jim, as I get there. What happens is this, is that the noble gases such as helium or argon or xenon, they spin in perfect balance, but there's something very neat about them. They form relationships, but on a different plane. They're not codependent relationships. They're selfless love relationships, meaning they get together with other elements that are also spinning in harmony and balance with each other. And they also are not influenced by any element that's not spinning in balance, so that as those elements walk through their world, if there's an atom that's all crazy, banging all over the place, the noble gas can look at it and say, yeah, I love you, but I'm not going to be influenced by you're out of balance. And yet, here comes the exciting part. When these noble atoms get hit by a photon of light, it causes them to get excited, and they spin at a different rate, but it also induces them to form a relationship with another noble gas, and they form these couples called eximers, which are excited dimers, okay? And you go, well, why is that interesting? Because I say both of these atoms are spinning in harmony with each other. Both of them are independently spinning in harmonies, but when they come together, they release photons of laser light. And why is that relevant? Because, as you talked about, as more and more people become aware and correct the imbalances in their lives and start to spin in harmony, they more or less resemble the noble gases. When they create relationships, they have the most loving experiences because they're not in codependency. They respect each other and honor each other, et cetera. And when they're together, they radiate light. And the more then that radiate light, the more it influences others. So we're coming through a wake-up period where people have been like out of balance, wobbly atoms living on this planet, banging all over the place, and beginning to wake up and say, oh, my God, we can adjust our balance, spin in that perfect balance, and in that perfect balance, not be swayed by things that are out of balance. We can walk in the world of out of balance and not even be influenced by it. And yet, when we're in that world as noble gases, and we become enlightened with photons, we then start to get excited, get together, create communities, and collectively those communities are the source of laser light. So on a darkening planet, I see an ever-growing light that could be a blast of laser light that will harmonize and unify this planet as each of us learn to spin and balance and stop wobbling so much.
Oh, that's a great run out. That's an absolutely great run out. And it's so consistent with the places we get to play because we kind of define that space without trying to give this a deep definition, is that kind of fifth dimensional space, which is very accessible, is what you just described. It's the place where you have respect and dignity, appreciation, gratitude, those places where you have an allowing that allows that third dimensional, noisy, angry, resentful person to be okay without attaching to them.
Absolutely.
And it's so complimentary. That was a wonderful, wonderful run out. I'm very grateful. So, but it's so exciting, and it's fun, Bruce, listening to you because a person can't stay in an unexcited state as they listen to you. It's that space where you raise that light up to such a level where it's like, whoa, I love this guy. So,
Jim, I want to tell you,
great.
my life was not always that way. It was the lessons the cells taught me, and I am so excited because the cells open the door to my whole life, I wasn't a spiritual person. I didn't believe in this. My life was nothing I was proud to be talking about outside of my research. And today, I live in what I now perceive as I'm living in heaven, and I realize, oh my God, we all live in heaven, except most of us are buying other people's creations and modifying the heaven not to conform what they want, but to conform what other people programmed them to be. And that's the wake-up call that I get so excited about, because I realize, oh my God, there's so many people that think, oh, when I die, I'm going to go to another place and it's going to be heaven and all that. And I'm thinking, you didn't get it.
You missed it.
This is heaven. This is where your spirit comes to jump into a body, and in that body be able to manifest and create and experience a planet that is indeed a Garden of Eden. And yet, we're so lost, all we see is the trash we've created and the lives that have become trash because we don't even realize how valuable the opportunity we have as spirits to be in physical bodies on this planet. And that's what I would love people to see, because it truly is heaven. And it's really funny, because I said when I started all this, I wasn't spiritual at all. Matter of fact, that's why I got into the biology, the chemistry, the genes, the molecules, the physical Newtonian machine. And the day that I perceived how the mechanism worked, which was farther away from the genes than anybody thought, when I understood the nature of the brain of the cell, the thing I also recognized was this, is that our identities as individuals are determined by a set of antennas, protein antennas, little protein molecules on the surface of our cells. No two people have the same identical antennas. And people say, oh, the individual self is due to these physical antennas. I go, no, you see, you got it wrong. They're called antennas. What they do is they receive a broadcast that our identity is something in the field that is picked up by our cells. And when I saw the mechanism and the mechanics of it, it's like, here's a guy, like, up until 1:59 in the morning, 40 years, no spirituality, and 1 minute later, it's like, oh, okay, I understand it. It's fully spiritual. It's like, wow, that 1 minute was like, of course, blow my whole life and my mind out. But the reality that got so beautiful was I saw the mechanics and owned as a biologist the reality that I am a spiritual entity playing through this body. And what was funny, because what I wanted to bring up after all that story was this point, which is connected to what you were talking about. I said to myself, wait a minute, I am a spirit, but I'm also a body. And I thought to myself for a second, why have both? And all of a sudden the answer just welled up from my cells. And I always laugh because they answered in the form of a question, so maybe there's Jewish cells in there. The answer, I asked the question, why have both a spirit and a body? And the cells came back with this, which blew my mind, and they said, Bruce, if you're just a spirit, what does chocolate taste like?
If you enjoyed this episode of Conversations With, join Jim Self on the third Tuesday of every month on the Awakening Zone Network for more stimulating discussions with leading-edge teachers, authors, and channels. If you're looking for free tools for your personal and spiritual growth, if you want to be who you came here to be, visit masteringalchemy.com, where you can learn more about Jim, his work, and future guests on this show. We also have a Facebook fan page, Mastering Alchemy with Jim Self. Our theme song is Hands of Love by Barry Goldstein. May you experience laughter and grace on your journey.